The King has turned 20 years old. On March 5th, 2001, Conker's Bad Fur Day was released on the Nintendo 64, being one of the last big releases on the console. As a result, the game wasn't a huge commercial success, selling only 55,000 copies in its first month and IGN calling it a certifiable flop. But that didn't stop Conker from becoming a cult icon, including a full-on remake eventually being just a few years later. What is it about this adorable, innocent squirrel that people love so much? Maybe it's the fact that he's none of those things except the squirrel thing. At first, he did start off as an adorable, innocent squirrel in Diddy Kong Racing. Then the developers at Rare decided to give him his own game, which started out as a family-friendly title called 12 Tales Conker 64, originally planned for release in 1998. Though, back then, there wasn't much to separate this game from the dozens and dozens of other 3D platformers at the time. So the team decided that the best way to separate it from the oversaturated market was to gear it towards adults. They didn't do this by adding in a few swear words though, they went all the way with it. Conker's Bad Fur Day is the epitome of messed up. To call it a mature game would be the understatement of the century. This game has it all: bloodthirsty Nazi teddy bears, titillating sunflowers, and great big mighty poos. This game definitely has shock value going for it, with fans and critics agreeing that it is also a great game, even garnering must-play status on Metacritic. But does it hold up exactly 20 years later? Well, we're about to find out, as I only recently completed this game for the first time. So what you're going to hear in this retro review is the opinion of someone with no nostalgia or bias for Conker's Bad Fur Day. That said, I am a huge fan of the developer Rare, as most of their games have aged like fine wine, most notably Banjo-Kazooie, which I can still play today and enjoy every bit of. However, Conker is not a collectathon platformer in the same vein as Banjo-Kazooie, as it's almost completely linear, with you partaking in a variety of increasingly outrageous scenarios rather than looking for objects, although you do collect dollar bills that shout obscenities at you.
Hey, I'm here. Hurry up. Pick me up, shithead.
In a sense, Conker's Bad Fur Day is like a mature version of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, taking you through a series of loosely connected scenarios that may or may not scar you for life. One minute you're swimming in shark-infested waters, the next minute you're a vampire bat, and the minute after that you're on the beaches of Normandy. It gets wild. Even the story itself is just ridiculous. It begins with our furry protagonist having a night out with the lads and getting plastered in the process. The following morning, he wakes up with a bad hangover and just wants to go home to see his girlfriend Barry and then go to sleep, before taking a wrong turn and accidentally beginning his adventure. And that's it. Conker only wants to get home, but a series of increasingly bizarre obstacles stand in his way, from a gargoyle to zombies and even Nazi teddy bears. The main villain, if you can call him that, is an evil panther king who wants nothing but to drink his milk, but he can't do that without a new leg for his table. And his German scientist minion suggests using a squirrel as a makeshift table leg. I'm not making this up, this is a real plot point, and it's amazing. No doubt, the story is what everyone remembers from this game, not just because of the events that occur, but also the overall tone. It comes off as an adult parody of a children's platformer made by Rare, and the best part is that it was actually made by Rare. To see them parodying themselves is glorious, especially when inanimate objects with eyeballs are involved, as they cuss up an absolute storm.
You better get this fat-ass bitch off of my back pronto!
One of the most iconic objects is the sunflower, who has a gigantic pair of breasts that you jump on because of course. Who in their mind would come up with stuff like this? Probably the game's director and lead designer Chris Seaver, who voices the iconic character and the rest of the male characters, with the exception of the Great Mighty Pooh, but we'll get to him later. I'd be lying if I said none of these moments got a few laughs out of me, simply due to how actually wild they are. The part that'll stick with me forever was when you had to get 3 cows to poop down a valve by feeding them prune juice, and when you're done with them, you viciously blow them to smithereens with a bull. That's just, I can't even say that's dark, it's just strange. While this is indeed a very effed up parody of children's 3D platformers, Conker's Bad Fur Day also parodies movies, more so in the latter half of the game. These range from brief nods to blatant spoofs with entire levels dedicated to specific films. I looked up a full list of the film parodies in the game, and I was surprised to find that I missed a lot of them, some of which were from before my time, but also because the more subtle ones are easy to miss. One thing is for sure though, Chris Seaver is a big Kubrick fan. While I expected some of the bigger spoofs to feel dated given the game's 20 years old, they surprisingly did not, because the films referenced are absolute classics, like Saving Private Ryan and The Matrix. Heck, some of these movies are still receiving new entries, like Terminator, Aliens, and again, The Matrix. And even though these spoofs are extremely in your face, the game still adds its own flair to them. Do you remember in Saving Private Ryan when they fought a demented pack of teddy bears who conducted experiments on soldiers? Did we watch the same movie? The best parts of Conker's Bad Fur Day by far, though, are the bosses. They're not too advanced from a gameplay perspective, but they're perhaps the most humorous parts of the game. The first boss appears to be a giant bale of hay until it reveals itself to be a giant Terminator. Or should I say, Termin-Hater. Here you have to trick it into electrocuting itself so you can press the giant button on its back. Again, not a complex fight, but did anyone expect a bale of hay to be a robot? Another one of my favorites is the big guy, a bourgeois big bollocked boiler. He has a deep manly voice right until you hit him in his gonads. You'll then do this again with another boss, Booga the Nut, where you gotta use your raptor friend to bite him right in his boogas and then take 3 big chunks out of his butt. You can't come back from that. Of course, we can't talk about this game without bringing up the Great Mighty Pooh.
I am the great mighty Pooh, and I'm going to throw my shit at you.
Picture this. You go through an entire level that is covered in poop. You walk on it, you swim through it, you roll piles of it, so how do you think this segment is going to end? Naturally, by fighting a giant pile of poo that happens to be an opera singer. It's already wild enough to create a boss that's a literal pile of feces, but a pile of feces that can sing? The boss itself is simple, having you throw toilet paper into his mouth. But what makes him stand out isn't just the fact that he's a giant pile of poop, but the lyrics he sings are wonderfully crass.
Now I'm really getting rather mad. You're like a niggly, tickly, shitty little tag nut. When I've knocked you out with all my bab, I'm going to take your head and ram it up my butt.
Your butt.
My butt.
Your butt.
That's right, my butt.
Ugh.
My butt. My butt!
I should point out though that if you play this on an Xbox Series X or S, you may find a glitch where he just stands there after a few attacks. This was brought to Rare's attention in January, so hopefully they can fix this issue soon. The humor in Conker's Bad Fur Day is beyond crude, and some of the jokes don't age well as a result, especially the ones that poke fun at sexual abuse. Namely the part where you're forcing female cogs right below a male cog who's enjoying it way too much. At least the part with the king bee and the sunflower had some hint of consent, but there was something way too dark going on with these cogs. Fortunately, they got revenge before they set off to the Caribbean. I get that the humor is intended to be offensive, but in this day and age, there are some lines you should not cross, and in my opinion, that is one of them. Same goes for the joke where the pitchfork attempts to commit suicide. This was funnier in 2001, not so much in 2021. Personally, I don't enjoy the offensive parts of the game as much as I do the absurdly violent ones, like when the bulldog shark gets loose and starts viciously eating the catfish in the river. That's what they get for cheating me out of my $10. There's always something about cute cartoon animals getting vigorously slaughtered that I find amusing. I should probably see someone about that. Conker's Bad Fur Day is also a technical marvel for the Nintendo 64, taking full advantage of the hardware, including an astonishing amount of high-quality, at the time, voice work. The level of detail within the worlds and on the characters are great too, especially on Conker, who is incredibly expressive. It was not common to see expressive characters like this on the Nintendo 64, so in that regard, Conker was sort of ahead of its time. Granted, I am playing the Rare Replay version, which, while using the exact same assets, does run at a higher resolution and more stable frame rate. But it's still impressive to see the amount of work put into this game's visual and audio presentation. Anyway, I've talked a lot about the offensively absurd nature of Conker's Bad Fur Day, but because it's a video game, we have to also judge it by the gameplay merits as well. And if this game didn't have the crude humor and bizarre story, it just wouldn't be a masterpiece. By far, the most dated aspect of the game is the gameplay itself, from the controls to the level design. I first noticed that the camera controls were inverted, and there's no way to change that. Even if you could, it's still a sloppy camera, and I spent a lot of time trying to fight it so I could see where I was going. It's especially worse when gunplay is introduced in the latter half of the game. These controls probably made more sense on a Nintendo 64 controller 20 years ago, but with a modern Xbox controller, everything is backwards. You hold the right trigger to aim down the sights, use the left stick to adjust your aim, the right stick to move, and the left trigger to shoot. These are the literal opposite controls you'd expect for a shooter game, and I never got used to them. The most frustrated I got with them was during the zombie graveyard section. At first, I didn't know you could aim down the sights with the right trigger, so I had to keep running around avoiding the zombies before they bum rushed me in this section with no health pickups. And even with the aiming, it was still a difficult fight, even more difficult than the hallways filled with teddies. Still, this part overstayed its welcome, and I groaned every time I was thrown into another hallway filled with laser traps and teddies around every corner. The one mechanic that baffled me the most was fall damage. I can't tell you how many times I've been injured by a fall that was just a few feet. Even worse, some of the levels are designed as if you can't take fall damage by including a lot of pits and tall buildings that are easy to fall off of. This happened to me a lot in the Windy chapter, and there's also a part in the Prehistoric chapter where you have to get flung to the top of a dinosaur statue, and it's really easy to fall off this thing while you're trying to get to its nostrils. As it is, Conker's Bad Fur Day isn't the most refined game in 2021, but there are still elements that are enjoyable. The bull riding section, though a bit repetitive, was fun in its own screwed up way thanks to how easy the bull was to maneuver. I also had a blast playing as a vampire bat, picking up villagers, and throwing them in the meat grinder. If I had to pick a favorite chapter, it would be Ooga Booga, not because you sacrifice a poor baby dinosaur, but because you get to carry a bomb for the Mafia to blow the place up, which leads to a Back to the Future style hoverboard race against a group of cavemen, and it concludes with an arena battle against Fangy the Raptor. This game goes to places you would not expect, which is what made me want to keep playing in spite of the frustrating parts. Unfortunately, a lot of the frustration comes at the end with the Saving Private Ryan section and the final boss. Sandwiched between these parts, though, is the brief but satisfying Matrix level, where you use slow-mo tactics to shoot up some soldiers. And just when you think it's about to end with a boss fight against the Panther King, a new parody bursts right out of his chest. And like the end of the movie, Conker mans or squirrels a machine to take the alien down. This boss takes some practice to defeat, having you learn its quick attack patterns in order to get the jump on it and throw it out into space, Mario 64 style. And at the end, Conker just shatters the fourth wall completely and asks the programmer to give him a samurai sword and bring back some dead characters. But he forgot Barry, who somehow ended up on this adventure with him and got thrown into space. In that sense, the end of this game is not necessarily a happy one. It doesn't end with any celebration or happy music, just Conker acquiring his throne and begrudgingly enjoying a glass of milk before going back to the bar. He's probably disappointed because he knows he'll never get a sequel. So what did I think of my first time playing Conker's Bad Fur Day? Well, when those credits rolled, I felt rather mixed. While I enjoyed most of the jokes and parodies, aside from the ones that were too dark by today's standards, I also liked the bosses and the fun sections I talked about earlier, those being the Ooga Booga chapter and the Matrix fight scene. However, the last half of the game is filled with a lot of frustrating moments that I owed to some sloppy shooting controls and a final boss that took way too long to figure out. But As I sat down to write this review and later talked about it with my fellow GameXplain colleagues, I discovered that I liked the good parts way more than I disliked the bad parts. This game took me on a bizarre ride through every chapter, and at the end of each one, I couldn't wait to see where it would take me next. What was holding it back though were those frustrating and poorly designed sections involving gunplay. This game should have never had any fall damage, and the aiming controls should have been seriously revamped. So in the end, I liked Conker's Bad Fur Day in spite of its flaws, and I may even play it a second time now that I'm more used to the controls and know how to go about the objectives. After 20 years, I would say it's worth revisiting or playing for the first time. If you're a newcomer like me, chances are you will be turned off by the parts of the game that haven't aged well, but you may also enjoy the sick, darkly humor and the chaotic story. Conker's Bad Fur Day is not a masterpiece in my eyes, but it's something too unique to ignore. The question now is if we'll ever see Conker again in a sequel or something else. Well, if these past few years have taught us anything, it's that Microsoft hasn't forgotten about Conker, putting him in the game Project Spark, and nope, so hopefully we'll see more of him in this decade. If they are going to make a sequel, however, there are going to be some jokes that won't fly today. But that doesn't mean they won't be able to make a game as shockingly bizarre as the first one. There will probably be a lot more blood and a lot more swearing. Maybe we'll get a Mad Max parody. You know you want it. Anyway, what do you think of Conker's Bad Fur Day 20 years later? Do you still love it? Do you think it's overrated? Let us know in the comment section down below, and subscribe to GameXplain for more videos like this one. Also check out the videos on the right for more topics that you might be interested in. Until next time, bye.